I'll be honest, there was a time I followed the routine exactly the way everyone says you should. Brush twice a day, floss when you remember, finish with mouthwash, that burning, minty rinse that feels like it's working. That sensation gives you confidence, like you've done something important, something complete. But after a while, something started to feel off. Not immediately. Not in a way that made me stop. It was quieter than that, because despite doing everything right, nothing was really changing. My gums still felt sensitive in certain spots. There were days they looked slightly inflamed, and that strange metallic taste in the morning, still there. It didn't make sense. How could I be so consistent and still feel like I was stuck in the same place? That question lingered in ways I didn't expect, because consistency is supposed to equal results, right? If you show up every day, follow the protocol, do exactly what you're told, things should improve, but they weren't. And that created a strange kind of frustration, not the explosive kind that makes you throw everything out and start over, but the quiet, eroding kind that makes you wonder if you're missing something fundamental. I started paying closer attention to how my mouth felt throughout the day. The freshness from the mouthwash lasted maybe 30 minutes, an hour at most. Then it was like nothing had happened. The same slight roughness on my teeth, the same tender spots along my gum line when I touched them with my tongue. And there was this other thing I'd been ignoring for too long. The way my gums looked in certain lighting. Not terrible, not diseased, just not healthy either. Slightly darker than they should be in some areas, a bit puffy. The texture wasn't quite right, less firm, more spongy. These weren't dramatic symptoms. They weren't the kind of thing that would make you rush to the dentist. But they were persistent. Always there, hovering in the background of my awareness. That's when a different kind of question started forming, not about what I was doing, but about what I had always believed. Because mouthwash, for most of us, isn't just a product. It's a symbol of hygiene, of care, of doing the extra step. The advertisements reinforce this constantly. Confident people swishing blue liquid, close-ups of smiles so white they seem to glow, promises of killing 99, 9% of germs in bold letters. It all sounds so reassuring, so scientific, so complete. But what if that narrative was oversimplified? What if the very thing marketed as the solution was only addressing part of the problem and potentially creating new ones in the process? But what if that extra step isn't actually solving the real problem? That thought stayed with me longer than I expected. I started reading the ingredient lists on my mouthwash bottles. Really reading them, not just glancing at the front label with its promises of advanced protection and clinical strength, alcohol, artificial sweeteners, synthetic colors, preservatives, and various antiseptic compounds with names I couldn't pronounce. None of this necessarily meant these products were harmful, but it made me wonder, what exactly was I putting in my mouth twice a day? And more importantly, how was it actually working? And the more I paid attention, the more I realized something subtle. Mouthwash works on the surface. It freshens breath, yes. It creates a temporary environment that feels clean. But the deeper issue, the bacterial imbalance along the gum line, doesn't always respond the way we think it does. This was the insight that changed everything for me. Because I'd been operating under the assumption that killing bacteria was the goal. The more bacteria eliminated, the healthier my mouth would be. But that's not how oral ecology actually works. Your mouth is home to hundreds of species of bacteria. Some are harmful, the ones that produce acids that erode enamel or toxins that trigger gum inflammation. But many are beneficial or neutral. They occupy space that would otherwise be colonized by pathogenic strains. They contribute to a balanced pH. They're part of a functioning ecosystem. Commercial mouthwash doesn't discriminate. It kills broadly. and in doing so, it creates a temporary void, a blank slate that gets rapidly recolonized, but not always by the same distribution of bacterial species that were there before. Sometimes the harmful bacteria come back stronger. Sometimes they develop resistance to the antiseptic compounds through repeated exposure. This is why so many people experience the same cycle. Mouthwash provides temporary freshness, but the underlying problems, sensitivity, inflammation, bleeding gums, persist or even worsen over time. In fact, many formulations rely heavily on antiseptics that act broadly, not selectively. They reduce bacteria, but not always in a way that restores balance. And that's where things get interesting, because gum health isn't just about eliminating bacteria, it's about controlling which bacteria thrive. This distinction is crucial, and it's something traditional oral care practices understood long before modern microbiology could explain why. The goal isn't sterility, it's balance. An oral environment where beneficial bacteria can flourish, where pathogenic strains are kept in check naturally, where the immune system isn't constantly triggered by chronic low-grade infection. Mouthwash, with its scorched earth approach, doesn't create that balance. It disrupts it repeatedly, day after day. That's when I started looking beyond the modern routine. Not out of rejection, but out of curiosity. And what I found surprised me more than I expected. Long before commercial mouthwashes existed, there were cultures that maintained oral health using something incredibly simple. No synthetic formulas, no artificial burn, just a method that worked with the body, not against it. I came across references to this practice in Ayurvedic texts, in traditional medicine from various Asian cultures, even in folk remedies from different parts of the world that had developed similar approaches independently. The common thread? Using oil in the mouth as a cleansing and healing agent. At first, it sounded almost too basic to take seriously. Oil, specifically, the practice of using natural oils in the mouth, something known today as oil pulling. But this isn't a trend. It's been documented for centuries, especially in traditional systems like Ayurveda, where it was used as a daily detox practice for the oral cavity. My initial reaction was skepticism. How could swishing oil around your mouth possibly be more effective than scientifically formulated mouthwash with proven antimicrobial ingredients? It seemed like the kind of thing that might have worked in ancient times when there were no alternatives, but surely modern chemistry had improved on such primitive methods? But the more I researched, the less primitive it seemed. I didn't expect much at first, but the logic behind it made sense. Certain natural oils, like coconut oil, contain compounds such as lauric acid, which has been studied for its antimicrobial properties. But instead of aggressively wiping everything out, it interacts differently. It binds to bacterial membranes, helping to reduce harmful strains while being gentler on the overall ecosystem of the mouth. The mechanism is fascinating. Oils are lipophilic. They attract and bind to the lipid membranes that surround bacterial cells. When you swish oil through your mouth for an extended period, traditionally 15-20 minutes, you're essentially pulling bacteria away from tooth surfaces, gum pockets, and the tongue. But unlike alcohol-based antiseptics that destroy bacterial cell walls indiscriminately, oil pulling works through mechanical action and selective antimicrobial properties. Lauric acid, the primary fatty acid in coconut oil, has been shown in studies to be particularly effective against Streptococcus mutans, one of the primary bacteria responsible for tooth decay, and various strains associated with gum disease. Yet it doesn't completely obliterate the oral microbiome the way harsh antiseptics do. It's not about shock, it's about balance. That phrase became my mantra as I learned more about this practice, because the difference in philosophy is profound. Modern oral care products are designed for immediate, dramatic effect. The burn of alcohol-based mouthwash signals that something powerful is happening. The foam from certain toothpastes creates the sensation of deep cleaning, but sensory impact doesn't always correlate with therapeutic effect. Oil pulling is the opposite. There's no burn, no foam, no immediate gratification, just a gentle, sustained action that works with your body's natural defenses rather than overriding them. And when I tried it, something shifted. Not dramatically overnight, but noticeably. I started with coconut oil, specifically organic, cold-pressed coconut oil, about a tablespoon first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. The first time was awkward. The oil was solid at room temperature, so it needed to melt in my mouth. The texture was strange, and 20 minutes felt like an eternity. But I committed to trying it consistently for at least 2 weeks before judging the results. By day 3, the process felt less foreign. I learned to do it while going through my morning routine, showering, getting dressed, preparing coffee. The time passed more easily when I wasn't just standing there focused on the swishing. By day 7, I noticed the first real change. My mouth felt cleaner in the morning. That thick, fuzzy coating I used to wake up with, the one that mouthwash would temporarily mask, was noticeably reduced. The sensitivity began to ease. That persistent morning taste started fading. And my gums, they looked calmer, healthier. By the end of 2 weeks, the results were undeniable. The inflammation I'd been living with, that slight puffiness and darker coloration in certain areas, had visibly improved. My gums looked pinker, firmer, more resilient. The sensitivity I'd experienced with cold foods and drinks was significantly reduced, not completely eliminated, but dramatically better than it had been in months. And my breath. This was perhaps the most surprising change. The freshness lasted throughout the day, not just for an hour after using mouthwash. It was a different quality of freshness, not the artificial mint mask, but a genuine absence of the bacterial processes that create bad breath in the first place. What struck me the most wasn't just the result, it was the simplicity. No complicated routine, no harsh chemicals, just consistency. And a method that actually made sense once you understood how it worked. There was something profoundly satisfying about this, about finding a solution that was both ancient and scientifically defensible, that required no expensive products, no prescriptions, no complex protocols, just oil, time, and consistency. It felt like uncovering a secret that had been hiding in plain sight all along, because the truth is, a lot of people aren't failing their oral health routine, they're just relying on solutions that don't fully address the cause. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. I started thinking about all the people I knew who complained about persistent gum issues despite religious oral hygiene habits, who went through bottles of specialized mouthwash trying to solve problems that never quite resolved. How many of them were stuck in the same cycle I'd been in? Treating symptoms superficially while the root cause, bacterial imbalance and chronic inflammation, continued unchecked. The more I learned, the more I realized this wasn't an isolated issue. It was a systemic misunderstanding about how oral health actually works. We've been conditioned to think in terms of warfare. Kill the bacteria, destroy the germs, eliminate the threat. But what if the better approach is diplomacy? Creating conditions where beneficial bacteria thrive, where harmful bacteria can't gain a foothold, where the natural defenses of the mouth function optimally. This isn't about rejecting modern dentistry, not at all. Professional cleanings are still important. Treating cavities, addressing structural issues, managing advanced gum disease, these all require professional intervention. But for daily maintenance, for preventing problems before they require professional treatment, for supporting gum health in ways that actually address the underlying biological processes, maybe we've been looking in the wrong direction. It's about complementing it with approaches that focus on the root of the issue: bacterial balance, inflammation control, and tissue support. And this is where both science and tradition begin to align. There are already studies exploring how oil pulling can reduce levels of harmful oral bacteria and improve markers related to gum health when used consistently. Not as a miracle, but as a supportive method. I found research published in peer-reviewed journals demonstrating that oil pulling with coconut oil significantly reduced plaque formation and gingivitis markers compared to control groups. Other studies showed reductions in Streptococcus mutans counts, the bacteria most associated with cavity formation. Still others documented improvements in gum health indices, reductions in bleeding on probing, and decreased pocket depths in people with mild to moderate gum disease who incorporated oil pulling into their daily routines. The evidence wasn't just anecdotal, it was measurable, reproducible, and growing. That distinction matters because what people are really looking for isn't magic. It's something that works and makes sense, something that doesn't require overcomplication or blind trust. This is what frustrated me most about conventional oral care marketing. The reliance on authority and intimidation. Trust us, we're scientists. This complex formula is beyond your understanding, rather than transparent explanation. Oil pulling is the opposite. The mechanism makes intuitive sense once explained. You can feel it working, and the results speak for themselves over time. There's no mystery, no proprietary blend of 17 ingredients with undisclosed concentrations. Just a simple, natural substance that's been used for thousands of years, now validated by modern research. And if you've been feeling that quiet frustration, that sense that you're doing everything right but not seeing real progress, maybe it's time to look at things from a different angle. I wish someone had told me this years ago, before I spent hundreds of dollars on various mouthwash formulations, each promising to be the solution to my gum sensitivity. Before I accepted persistent inflammation as just something I had to live with, something that was normal or genetic or just the way my mouth is. But before I resigned myself to the cycle of temporary improvement followed by gradual decline over and over again. The information was always available. The traditional knowledge, the emerging research, the logical explanation for why this approach works, but it was buried under layers of commercial messaging, drowned out by aggressive marketing from companies with products to sell. There's a method there, simple, natural, and grounded in real understanding, that's helping people step away from routines that no longer serve them and move towards something more effective, more aligned, and surprisingly accessible. The beauty of oil pulling is its accessibility. You don't need to find a specialty store or order exotic ingredients. Coconut oil is available in any grocery store, often in the baking aisle. It's inexpensive. A jar that costs less than a bottle of premium mouthwash will last for months. You don't need special equipment or tools, just a spoon to measure the oil. You don't need to completely overhaul your routine. Oil pulling is something you can incorporate alongside your existing habits, not as a replacement for brushing and flossing, but as a complementary practice that enhances their effectiveness. And you don't need to take anyone's word for it. Try it for 2 weeks and see what happens. The investment is minimal, the risk is essentially zero, and the potential benefit is significant. Because in the end, this isn't just about mouthwash. It's about questioning what we've accepted without thinking. It's about realizing that sometimes the answer isn't something new. It's something forgotten. How many other health practices have we abandoned in favor of commercial solutions that don't actually perform better? How many traditional methods, refined over centuries of empirical observation, have we dismissed as primitive or unsophisticated without actually testing them against modern alternatives? Oil pulling is a case study in how we've been conditioned to equate newer and more complex with better, when sometimes the most effective solution is the simplest one. And when you reconnect with that, everything becomes clearer. Your gums respond differently, your confidence shifts, and that feeling of control that you're finally doing something that actually works comes back. I don't use commercial mouthwash anymore. The bottles under my sink sit untouched, remnants of a routine that never quite delivered on its promises. Instead, every morning, I start with oil pulling. 20 minutes while I go through the rest of my morning routine. It's become as automatic as brushing my teeth, actually more automatic, because the results reinforce the habit in ways mouthwash never did. My gums are healthier than they've been in years. The sensitivity is gone. The inflammation has resolved. My dental hygienist noticed the improvement during my last cleaning and asked what I'd changed. When I told her, she wasn't surprised. She said she'd seen a growing number of patients adopting oil pulling and that the results were consistently positive for those who stuck with it. So if this made you rethink even one part of your routine, stay with me. Subscribe to the channel, because this is just the beginning of uncovering what really makes a difference and what never did. Because oil pulling is just one example of a larger principle that sometimes the wisdom we need isn't found in the latest scientific breakthrough or the newest product innovation. Sometimes it's found in practices that have endured for centuries because they actually work, because they're based on a deep understanding of how the body functions, refined through countless generations of observation and application. Modern science is valuable, incredibly valuable, when it helps us understand why these traditional practices work, when it validates or refines them, when it helps us optimize their application. But we make a mistake when we assume that only recently discovered solutions are worth considering. When we dismiss thousands of years of accumulated knowledge as superstition or folk remedy, oil pulling works. The research confirms it, the mechanism makes sense, and the experiential evidence from people like me who've incorporated it into their lives is overwhelming. If your gums are inflamed, if your breath isn't as fresh as you'd like, despite rigorous oral hygiene, if you're tired of the burn and fade cycle of conventional mouthwash, if you're looking for something that actually addresses the root cause rather than masking symptoms, this might be exactly what you've been searching for. Not a magic bullet, not an instant cure, but a simple, effective practice that supports genuine oral health in ways that align with how your body actually works. And once you experience that difference, once you see your gums transform from inflamed to healthy, once you wake up without that coating on your tongue, once you realize you're not just managing problems but preventing them, everything changes. You stop accepting good enough when you know actually good is possible. You stop buying products that promise results they can't deliver. You stop feeling helpless in the face of persistent health issues that no one seemed able to solve. Because you've found something that works. Something simple, something natural, something that makes sense. And that discovery, that reconnection with ancient wisdom validated by modern understanding, is profoundly empowering. Your health is in your hands. Your mouth is responding to what you do daily. And the power to create genuine, lasting change doesn't require expensive products or complex protocols. It just requires oil, time, and the willingness to try something different. The rest will speak for itself.